Hi, my name is Dan Hake, and I am the HDR project manager for the Greenup Boyd County Freight Plan. As I mentioned during the last meeting, the purpose of the project is really to develop a comprehensive understanding and profile of the existing freight network in Boyd and Greenup counties. But really, the purpose of the project really focuses on informing decision makers, as they make funding and investment decisions on how to address both freight needs and how to better position the region for economic development. So as the title of the project infers, the focus of the study is on Greenup and Boyd County. However, we understand that freight is multi-jurisdictional and knows no borders. So we are definitely aware of the larger region and further out into the country and how the freight system in Greenup and Boyd relates to movement in and out and through the region. As far as deliverables, we're going to deliver a freight plan, a series of one-pagers. We believe these one-pagers are a good way to get the information out there and shareable, and make sure the plan doesn't sit on a shelf. And also deliver to Kiowa and the cabinet all GIS files. And our overall deadline for the project is September of next year. During our last meeting, we discussed the driving the freight conversation task. Today, we're going to discuss the freight system profile. The freight system profile looks at both existing freight networks and identifies a local freight network, but also looks at the existing conditions of the freight system. So, looking at freight networks and facilities, we identified and evaluated national highway system intermodal connectors, several federal freight networks, and StrawNet and StracNet, which are the Department of Defense highway networks and rail network. We also looked at state networks, both in Kentucky, but also in Virginia or West Virginia and Ohio. We looked at multimodal connectivity and the important role it plays. So rivers, airports, ports, railroads, pipelines. This map to the left is showing air cargo volumes coming out of Huntington Airport. Now, Huntington Airport is, of course, not in Green Boyd County, but it serves an important purpose and provides air cargo accessibility for Green and Boyd County, so we made sure it's included. And you can see on the map the amount of volume that goes to the FedEx hub in Memphis. And then lastly, we identified a local freight network, and I think this is probably one of the more important steps of this project, where we identify those logical last mile connections between those national state networks and multimodal connectivity points and local businesses and industry. So these are a series of maps we created in the document where we identified logical last mile connections between multimodal connectivity points, but also major freight users that have been identified by the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet and their partners. Here's the last map. For the freight system profile, we also looked at existing conditions, so looking at truck activity, volumes and percentages, reliability, which is similar to congestion but different. You can plan for congestion if you know something's congested every day at 3 o'clock. You can plan for that. We have no idea whether it's going to be congested or not. That's a reliability problem. We looked at origins and destinations for freight. We looked at safety, state of good repair, truck parking, freight impediments, which are geometric curves that are issues, bridge clearances, etc., and then rail grade crossings. So today I wanted to highlight, in the interest of time, truck activity, volumes and percentages, and origin, destination, and then safety, because safety is always number one. So over here to the right is overall truck activity, and how we calculated this was looking at GPS truck probe data. And if you notice, the most truck activity looks like it is taking place along US Highway 23 and I-64, which makes logical sense, especially down near the Big Sandy River crossing, where the refinery and the truck parking facility and I believe a truck stop is also located. So these are Some logical deductions, but a graphical representation of those GIS pings. From a truck volume standpoint, the little purple triangles are actual truck classification stations. As you can see, it doesn't cover all the roads that you may necessarily want to cover, especially when you're looking at last mile connectivity. So we used the GPS data and some projection factors to figure out what we believe would be an estimated truck volume and truck percentages. This is definitely something I want to get feedback on. So if you see a road on here that truck volume seeing pretty high or pretty low, we definitely want to hear about that. These are obviously estimates, so these are using the best knowledge and data out there, but that will never replace boots on the ground. So please let us know if you have any thoughts or feedback on this map. Origins and destinations. So this map represents where trucks begin and end, that also begin and end in Greenup or Boyd County. One small caveat, Streetlight, the data set that drives this analysis or is behind this analysis, resets a trip after a truck stops for 5 minutes. So what you're really looking at here is probably about a day's travel shed, but it still is representative of where things are going. So you can see how truck trips begin and end, both in Kentucky, but also West Virginia and up into Ohio and into Columbus. So this is a good representation of how freight is multi-jurisdictional, and it's important to keep that in mind as we push forward with the plan. Safety. Safety is always critical when we're constructing a freight plan. So we concluded a crash rate per million truck miles. And if you notice, a lot of the heavier crash corridors are also some of the heavier traveled corridors, which makes sense, but still is good information to look at and to plan for. And crash severity, so we calculated crash density. It's very similar to what took place during the Kiowa safety study earlier this year, that was completed earlier this year, and we actually compared the two. And there's a lot of overlap between the two different studies. While the larger study looked at all vehicles, we're obviously just looking at trucks here, but a lot of the locations were the same. There were some geographical differences between their study area and ours, but if you notice here, there's crashes on the interchanges of I-64 and along US 23, and places where we receive feedback from stakeholders where there's safety issues, and the data backs it up. So next steps, as we conclude this freight system profile, we're going to develop a series of one-pagers, very digestible, very graphical, making sure we're producing products that are usable. So that's a key way to communicate the key takeaways from this task. And we're also going to hold a steering committee meeting to validate our results with local stakeholders. We're also doing stakeholder engagement. We're doing interviews with freight users. We just developed an interactive website survey where you can actually go in and add comments to a map and tell us where there's freight issues. Those results from both the interview and the survey will supplement the freight system profile and future economic development tasks. And we're beginning work on using a site selection approach to tie freight to economic development. So that's my presentation for today. Please feel free to give me a ring if you have any questions or comments, or just want to talk through the larger document. Feel free to call or text or whatever you're most comfortable with. And additionally, here's my email address. And thank you today for watching my presentation.